Greetings, everyone. This is Shecky, aka Jeff Schechter, with the High Return Real Estate Show. And I'm here with my incredible business partner and friend, Mr. Jack Gibson. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Shecky. Hello, everybody. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, we got a really interesting one. And this is one that so many of our investors ask us about this all the time. And I'm surprised we haven't even done a podcast about this yet. But today, the topic is, should you pay off other debt before investing? So this is a really important topic. And we're going to dive into really what's good debt and what's bad debt, and really do some, let's just say, some myth busting here, right? About some of the things that we think we know about the way debt works. And we're really going to shatter some of your preconceived notions. So we're very excited to present this information to you. And let's rock and roll. Welcome to the High Return Real Estate Show, the podcast for heavy hitters. 2 men, 1 mission. It's time to build your empire. So welcome, everybody. Today we're talking about, should you pay off debt before investing? And I know, Jack, this is a topic that you are very passionate about, and you've done some really interesting things in your life to speak to this stuff too. But I think we need to start off this conversation first with just what consists of good debt and what consists of bad debt. I mean, you know, everybody's got different ideas about what they think good debt is, or when it's meaningful to take on debt and when it's not. And let's face it, as human beings, we all figure out a way to justify every damn thing in our whole life. Right. So let's try and remove some of that, you know, nice little way that we justify how we do things in our life. And let's get real here and talk about really what is really good debt and what is really bad debt. So, Jack, if you wouldn't mind, run us through your opinion, your expert opinion of what you think good debt is.
Well, this is definitely the $1 million question, Shecky. And, you know, I got to say that there is definitely an answer of it depends, can certainly can be the answer to a lot of these. Yeah. So it depends on, what is your current level of income? What is your level of experience as an investor? You know, how much savings do you have? You know, how much total debt do you actually have in your life? So there is a lot of it depends as far as, you know, go ahead.
No, I agree with you, and I'm sorry to cut you off. And I think I want to get to that. And I agree with you that it depends. But what I want to start off with is just, let's give some examples of what good debt is, because I want to just sort of demystify.
All right, let's start over.
Okay.
Start over.
Well, the first part was fine. We'll start from after the pause.
Okay.
After the bumper, you know.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So who's ever editing right now? This is the part
Edit this shit right out.
Yeah, we're going to start over. All right. So this is Shecky, and we are back. And today I'm just so excited. I'm so glad we're going to talk about this, and we're going to really demystify some things. I think, you know, human beings really do a very good job of justifying purchases, justifying debt, what's good debt, what's bad debt. But Jack, you know, in your expert opinion, would you mind, just to start off, you know, this podcast with a clean slate, what in your opinion comprises good debt?
Well, you know, that's a great question, Shecky. And I have to say that in most cases, it can definitely depend. So, but what I can definitely tell you is that there are some pretty, you know, ones that are pretty easy to be able to distinguish.
Okay, such as?
So we have to look at, okay, what's the general meaning or definition that you can apply to what good debt and bad debt is, and then I'll explain some examples. So good debt is debt that you take on that creates income for you. Good debt pays you, whereas bad debt creates a liability. Bad debt, costs you money, right? So if you kind of take that broad view of debt, good debt versus bad debt. Then there's some that, can be in the gray area. There's some that can be on either side, and I'll explain some examples. But to give you an idea of some good debt, rental property debt. So I have when I first got started, I had bought a package of 15 units, and then I cashed out, refied those. So now I had debt attached to that, which got all my cash back out of that investment and then some, because I got a really good appraisal based on the high income properties that we're, investing into. So now I have quite a bit of debt actually more debt on these properties than I actually had purchasing, as far as the purchase price goes, cash invested in.
Right.
And that's a great debt because I'm servicing that debt very easily by the rents that are coming in and able to pay off all the expenses and all that and still have surplus cash. So I'm making an infinite return on that debt, right? So to me, that's really, really excellent debt. Not just good debt, excellent debt, right?
Heck yeah. Yep.
And then other types of good debt, you have business startup debt. If you are going into and starting up a business and you have experience in that. So sometimes business startup debt can be bad debt if the person that's starting the business is risky and they have no idea what they're doing, right? Then you could call that bad debt. But we for this sake, right, we're going to call business startup debt as good debt because you're taking capital and somebody else's money and you're investing that into a startup of them to create, a profit. And, that's the entrepreneurial challenge, right? Is to take a startup debt and utilize that well, be a good steward of that money and make more money with it. Business expansion debt, right? So a lot of business owners, they want to expand their operations, but they need more capital. So that'd be another example of good debt. They're using that money to then be able to make more money long term. And then home debt can be like to purchase a home. That can be both good and bad. And here's my take on this, Shecky, is it all depends on do you first off, do you make a good buy? Like, do you get a good value on your property? Are you paying full market price or above market price for that property? So in that case, if you do that and pay too much, I think then we're talking bad debt. Do you have equity position in that house? So you're putting down, enough of a down payment to create equity. So if the property does drop in value like they did in 2008, you don't, go underwater on your property. And are you reasonable in terms of how much house are you actually buying compared to the income that you have? So you can certainly, and a lot of Americans take on way too much house than what they really actually should. And then 1 3-month or 6-month layoff at their job, right? Downsized, whatever company, goes out of business, whatever the case happens.
Yeah.
6 months and no income, and boom, their house is foreclosed on. That means you have bad debt because you did not put yourself in a position where you could reasonably service that debt on an ongoing basis and be able to survive, 6 to 12 months with no income. And then the last one I have here on the list, Shecky, is, education debt. So if you're going to learn a new marketable skill, which is going to increase your income, increase your marketability, and increase your value to the marketplace, well, I'm a huge proponent of, your number one investment is investing into yourself. So anytime you're putting, education and expanding your mindset, creating new skill sets, I think we can definitely argue that would be considered good debt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to put a couple asterisks on what you said about some of the different kinds of debt. So obviously I'm in full agreement about rental property debt. I think that's just a clear case of, arbitrage between what the actual gross income is versus the cost of servicing that. And, just like CapEx expenditures, things like that, paying off cash out refis and that sort of thing against that is great. And if your rental income is more than covering it, that's a really, really smart buy, because you're pulling some of that cash out to be able to, in our world, buy more property and buy more things that are income producing. The one that I've always been on the line about is your own home purchase. And one of the things that I heard you say is, is it smart and are you in a good position? But there are a couple of other things to consider when doing that, is if you're in a good position. So one of the things that I've always looked at is in the different cities that I've lived in and the homes that I've purchased. And by the way, I never, ever buy more home. Well, that's not true. I once bought more home than I should have.
Right.
I will never do that again, but you also have to look at, in your own town, your own city, what is the cost of renting something halfway decent? What does the rental market look like? Mm-hmm. Because obviously rents are, as inflation goes on, they're going to increase. Great for us if we own rental properties. If you're the renter, it may not necessarily be that great. But in many cases, renting can be far more attractive than buying in certain markets. You look at the cost of a home in some of these places like, San Francisco, and, you're going to spend $2 million just to buy a shack. And even though rents are expensive there, in relationship to what it costs to purchase, renting is still far, far more attractive because it just costs you so much to get into the market to buy there. So it depends on where you are, what your local area is, if that's necessarily a smart buy or not.
Sure.
Right. So the good thing about buying is that obviously you can fix that monthly cost. You may have some increase of taxes and repairs and things like that, but for the most part, you're locking in a payment. One of the things that I really take exception with, and I love realtors for the most part, but this realtors speak about, oh, your home is the greatest and biggest and smartest investment that you're ever going to make.
Right.
It's a mantra that has been repeated over and over and over. It's that mantra has been bludgeoned to death. And I do not agree with it at all.
I'm totally with you.
Yeah, for us, it's like the smartest investments you can make are things that are going to produce income, like rental real estate. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily a place that you're living. Now, if you're a single guy and you buy a big house and you own the house and you're renting out 3 other rooms, or you're Airbnb-ing the attic, or whatever, that's probably the exception to the rule, right? But because you're owning a place that you happen to live in, but it's also rental property. But if you're like typical American ma and pa kettle and you're making, $50,000 a year, and now you just went out and bought a, $800,000 house, man, that's going to be rough, and we saw what happened in the last crash when these banks got very, very aggressive and were, making loans to people that basically the only qualification was they could fog a mirror.
Right.
And, you as an individual just have to be smarter. And the goal of this particular podcast is to make every listener smarter and better about money and better about understanding. And just to, again, put an asterisk on what you said, I think the most important thing you said in that whole lineup is there is a line between what good debt and bad debt is. Oftentimes the line gets blurry, but let's define exactly what that line is. On one side of the line, you have things that cost you. On the other side of the line, you have things that make you money, okay? And if you just use that as the benchmark for a general overview of what good debt versus bad debt is, I think that's a fantastic starting point. Again, as humans, we can always justify things, right? Like you could say, for example, I can justify this purchase of my own home because I'm in a good solid equity position. I'm making $50,000 in equity the moment I sign the papers. Well, that's not really entirely true. I would probably call BS on that because you're not making that 50K. It's just a perceived 50K. And the only way you're going to realize that 50K is if you then turn around and flip it and sell the property. And how much is that 50K really after all the closing costs?
Oh, gosh.
So again, let's not, we're masterful at justifying purchases. That's what we do as human beings and as good, solid Americans, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's just what we do. But I just want to make sure that the message of this podcast is clear, that let's be real with ourselves and know what we're doing. If you want to do that, go ahead, but let's at least ask yourself the important questions, right? So good debt's going to create income. Bad debt is going to cost you, right? So let's go on to the next part about there's a million cases, Jack, as you know, of it depends,
Sure.
right? So when is a situation where you could leverage that? It depends. When's the situation where you can justify it? I'll ask it to you in a question. You mentioned, hey, can you go out and learn a new marketable skill? So is it smart for somebody right now to go and take on $100,000 in student loan debts to get a college degree?
It depends.
Exactly. What does it depend on?
Right. I mean, it depends on what kind of degree are they going to get? Is it a marketable degree? I mean, you go and get a degree in art history. I mean, not knocking anybody if that's your degree. I'm just saying,
right.
It's really, I mean, you have one option really. You'd be a professor. That's your option with that degree. It's not a very marketable degree. So it depends on that. It depends on, are you going to actually stick it through and complete the degree and go all the way with it? And, are you going to really apply yourself as you are studying? And then is that a field that you're going into that is it expanding or is it shrinking? I mean, is technology possibly going to wipe out that, all the jobs that have to do with that degree in the next 5, maybe 10 years down the road? So there are variables, Shecky, and therefore it definitely depends. I mean,
yeah,
it's a tough one. That's a tough one to really put a hard line on, right? Like this is good debt or bad debt, because it definitely could depend.
Yeah. So let's talk about the most famous thing that we see all across our country and all across the world: consumer debt, credit card debt.
Yeah.
So let me give you a really great example. Okay. Single mom. She's trying to save money. She's got a job. She's got 3 kids. She's getting child support. Christmas time comes along, and it's like, her son's a good kid. He's a good boy. He really wants that electric train set. She knows it. She doesn't really have the, $179 to really buy this kid the electric train set. But for God's sake, it's Christmas.
Right.
What are you going to do? Right. I mean, you want the kid to have something cool and whatever. So, Thanksgiving time rolls around and she sees it on sale for, $159 instead of $199. And she goes out and plunks it on her credit card. Right now it's 6 months later. She's still paying interest on it at God knows what interest rate is it. And the kid has already busted 2 of the trains and the tracks don't stay together. And it's basically gathering dust. He liked it for the first couple of months. It was great. It was probably one of his favorite toys at Christmas, but now it's 6 months later. So the question becomes that, if you're the single mom with a big heart for your kids, was that or was that not a good purchase?
Oh, geez. You answer that one. I don't want to answer that.
Well, I'm just going to let you be heartless.
All right.
Well, all right. I'm a single guy. I'll answer it.
Yeah.
I think it was a bad purchase.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with being compassionate towards your children. I would never say that. I think that given that you pretty much know as a parent that pretty much any toy like that is going to get worn out. It's going to break. The kid's going to outgrow it, whatever. Is that the kind of thing now that you want to be spending with your interest? Do you want to still be paying $10 a month for that toy over the course of, say, 3 years. I mean, that $159 purchase over 3 years probably cost you $400, and it's just not the kind of debt you want to take on. It just doesn't make sense. So I would say, look, find ways to, buy, if you're in that position, find ways to buy things at garage sales, find ways to, get less expensive toys, find ways to buy things that don't break in 2-3 months. Maybe it's just something that's, it's like a wood replica or something like that, that's pretty much indestructible, and, kids want things, and that's great. We all want things, but, what are things that they're going to use, that they're going to help? Like, to me, if it were my kid, I'd have bought him the bike, and the helmet, by the way, to go with it. Because if I'm going to be in debt, I want him to have something that's going to, A, keep him healthy, and B, that is not going to wear out in 2-3 months, right? And if he says, Mom, I'm bored, it's like, we'll go out and ride your bike.
Right. Find some neighborhood kids that have a PlayStation, go play with theirs.
Yeah. No, that's another option too. Yeah. So it's, and technology changes very, very fast too. And yeah, you can get on things like Craigslist and buy stuff used. So, there's ways to do that. I'm bringing up an extreme example, and, obviously that was intentional, but I really want, everybody, not just parents, but everybody that's out there, really just start thinking about what is it that you're spending money on? Like, people, I go into, like, I'm a big coffee guy, and I'm not necessarily a big fan of Starbucks, but I go into Starbucks sometimes, for a meeting or just to grab their Wi-Fi or whatever. And I see these people like every day ordering these mocha, frappa, wappa, half calf, triple delight. It's like a $9 cup of coffee.
Right.
And in every case, they're pulling out their credit card.
Sure.
Now, I don't necessarily know that that's necessarily a credit card or a debit card or whatever. But when I look at these people, they're typically just, I don't mean just, they're worker bees. They're obviously at a job. They're downtown. They're, getting ready to go on their next shift. They're dressed up in downtown kind of worky clothes. So, what are they making? 60, 70, 80 grand a year, whatever it is. But at $7, $8, $9, like I can buy lunch for less than that. And I'm not trying to sound like a cheapskate, but you do that 5 days a week. And just start looking, go through your credit card statement and start looking at what you are spending on Starbucks.
Yeah, it'll add up.
And so then you're paying interest on it.
Yes, exactly.
That's the stuff that kills you.
Yeah, so this is what I want to talk about, is like examples of bad debt. So, obviously credit card debt where, it's consumer credit card debt. I mean, overwhelmingly, we can call that bad debt. If you have to go into debt to buy something that you want versus like an actual basic human need, food, clothing, shelter, then there's no way you can go and say that that's good debt. That we can be sure of, confident, boom, stamp it. It's bad.
Yep.
So now we have some things where could go either way. So, we talked about your home. So, already covered that. That definitely could be a good or bad depending on the situation. Your car. Now, Shecky, I know you were in the car business for a couple times. So, maybe you can enlighten us a little bit on, this is one of the biggest, expenses next to your home.
Yeah.
That your people in America are going to, pay money for.
Yeah. And I see so many mistakes being made here. And let me just pull the curtain back, for people that are listening that don't completely get this. So number one, obviously we place a lot of our own image on the car that we drive. There's a huge ego play, whether you admit that or not. There are some people that say, hey man, I just need basic transportation, whatever, that's cool. Right. But we get deluded into thinking we're getting a good deal. Car manufacturers, car dealers are masters at advertising in ways that appeal to our sense of a good deal, of justifying. It's like, hey, look, we know the car is $40,000. But the fact of the matter is, you're getting 3 years of warranty. You're not going to have any surprise expenses. And guess what? It's only 1.9 interest rate. The cost of money is so cheap. How can you not want to buy this great deal? Right? So we think, oh my God, I'm getting cheap money.
Right.
And I'm like, the perception is I'm getting this great deal. Okay, here's your wake-up call. In 4 years, your $40,000 car is now worth about $16,500. Okay, It's just the fastest and biggest depreciation schedule of anything ever invented is the automobile. And you could say, well, I drive a Lexus, so I'm minimizing that, whatever. Yeah, it may be true that some brands do depreciate at a slower rate than others, but they're all would, in my opinion, as a previous car guy, they would all fall into the category of disgustingly bad performance, even the good ones.
Right.
So, if you want something that is a little bit nicer or whatever, yeah, I get it, right? But if you buy something 3 or 4 years old, 5 years old, that's still got reasonable 50, 60,000 miles on it. Most halfway decent manufacturers of cars today will build a product that with proper maintenance will go 150 to 200,000 miles without big problems. That's not to say that if there aren't costs involved in doing that, but compared to the amount of exposure you have in depreciation, those costs are insignificant. And nowadays you can also prepare for that and buy extended warranties that go out 5, 6, 7, 8 years too. So if you want to say, hey, I'm just going to throw $3,000 at this right now and own an extended warranty for the next 4 or 5 years, again, you've been able to plot that out, because that car is, even the $3,000 you put towards the extended warranty is way less than what that car is going to depreciate had you bought it new or next to new. In fact, I just read something recently that the depreciation schedule that goes on with today's cars, in other words, when they say today, we're talking about anything that's happened 2013, 2014, and later, all these kind of late model cars now, because they've become so computer reliant, right? They've all got their GPS and their Bluetooth and Wi-Fi stations and all that stuff inside the car. But because technology is changing so fast, they are becoming outdated faster than they ever were before. And as a result, the depreciation schedules are now happening even faster than they ever were before.
Sure.
Right? So it's like there's no win there on your 1.9% interest rate on the new or next to new car. You want to make a good, smart decision, buy something 3, 4, 5, 6 years old and drive the flipping wheels off of it.
Yeah, that's what we did, Shecky. The last 15 years, I mean, we've not bought a new car except for, in the last I'd say the last year. I got my wife a new, car to soccer mom, drive the kids around. And then, I got a new, sports car for myself. But we had, put ourselves in a position where we were more than comfortable being able to do that, So
right,
we probably saved $100,000, maybe $150,000 over the last 15 years, probably more than that, because we bought, about 4 years, 30, 40,000 mile cars.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. And that just makes such a huge difference. And look what you've been able to do with that, because then you're not fully, committed to that expensive, nice car and all those big payments. And you can take that and use that to save other money to then go out and buy income producing assets like rental property, which ironically put you in the position that later on allowed you to buy the fancier cars.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's a pretty big irony there.
Yeah. The rental. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The rental income is what made me feel comfortable to go out and, buy those cars, because my tenants are paying, I'm providing a good product, right? A good product to them every single month. They're paying me to do that. And in essence, they're paying for me to have really nice things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great formula. I mean, I remember the first time I met you, And you picked me up, I don't remember, at the hotel I was staying at. And I jumped into your Mercedes. Okay, yeah, Mercedes is a fancy car, but I'm kind of looking around going, man, this thing is kind of rough, like it's kind of dusty and old, and and you were just like, man, I don't care, runs good, and I've had it for many years, and it's been paid for many years. And I like made a mental note about, like, smart dude, this guy is smart with his money. That was the very first time I met you in person. And it really, really had an impact on me. Especially being an ex-car guy, like, I really appreciate that. Here's a guy that gets it, who understands he's not going to get sucked in to that game of depreciation just for image or whatever, right? So anyway, so how do people get to this point where they are making the right decisions? Like, we're all victimized by advertising, right? We're all victimized by our own ego.
Sure.
So how the heck do you, this is the toughest part, is the self-discipline, right? Like, how do you get to that point where you're able to say every time, I'm going to look at this line, and which side of the line does it fall on? Is it good debt or is it bad debt? Is it making me money or costing me money? How do you get disciplined about that?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to have very clear vision and goals of where you're going. And, you got to live like no one else, so that down the line you can live like no one else. And if you're very clear and you're aligned with your, significant other on that, and the two of you together are all in, then you're going to have a lot easier time delaying that gratification. But the reality is, Shecky, most people won't do it. They just, the shiny object, they got to have it. They got the money, so they're going to buy it. And so they're going to buy the $50,000, $60,000 car, which a lot of them are going for that right now.
Yeah.
It's pretty,
and then some.
Pretty almost like an average, price for a car nowadays. And instead of buying the 4 or 5 year old, nice quality, decent car, they're like, I just can't do it. I got to keep up with the neighbor Joneses or whatever, and, instead you could add a rental property, paying you out, whatever, several $100s a month in positive cash flow. But instead you took on a very serious monthly liability that's going to, just keep draining your bank account. So
the irony is, too, the person that you're impressing is the guy across the street that's in the same boat, also hooked up to the $50,000 car with the monster payment.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's the guy you're impressing, right? It just is like, instead of building for your own future.
It reminds me of that commercial. The guy is out in his lawn and he's saying, I see my nice house, see my nice car. I'm in debt up to my ears, right?
Yeah.
And he's just this look. He's got this big old smile, but it's like, you could tell it's frustration and disappointment behind it that's masked by this smile of, oh, look at my grandiose life, but it's really kind of fake. It's really, it's all bark, no bite. Mm-hmm. So, and so moving on, as far as other forms of bad debt, like a boat, in most cases, you could probably say a boat's bad debt. I mean, if you're like, you're like those people that love boating and you do it all the time, and you could definitely, and you got a good deal on it, and you maybe got a good interest rate type payment. Could depend.
Buy one 3 or 4 years old. Don't buy a new one.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So just that's one that definitely can depend. I mean, if you're paying 15%, on the interest on that boat, and you use it, 3 or 4 times a year, and that is a bad debt on a boat. Same with like a jet ski, same with like a snowmobile. Oh, yeah. I can't see any way that a snowmobile ever could be considered, anything other than bad debt if you have, a note on that, right? I mean, I don't care what the interest rate is. You're probably using that puppy, just a handful of times a year, and you're paying on it all year round. That doesn't make sense. So, other things, Shecky, having a bunch of flat screen TVs that you go and, obviously that's just massive spending, consumer debt. Taking vacations. I remember a gal that took her family on a $10,000 additional vacation. So they already won one from their company as a sales incentive to go, to Hawaii, and they took the family. Could have taken pretty much most expenses were covered. Okay, as a free it was an earned vacation, right? And then they went on for another week and spent an additional $10,000, going to like Maui or something like that. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I make what, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times what they did. I'm like, I would not do that.
Yeah.
And then turns out, she owed her mom like $25,000, and instead of paying her mom off, she spent the $10,000 in her bank account because she had it to go do this, little vacation. So, she'd learned through that, mistake. But that's just something a lot of people do. It's like, why would you take a vacation that you really can't afford when you got all this, other bad debt staring you in the face? Attack that first, pay that off, get that out of your life.
Yeah, I want to answer. You bring up again. We sort of seem to be dialed back around to this same conversation about personal discipline when it comes to this stuff, right? And I want to kind of answer my question to you. I want to answer it myself because I just thought of something, and I asked you, well, how do you develop that discipline? How do you exercise that muscle about making those kinds of decisions? A long time ago, I don't remember when it was, but it was earlier in my years of personal development, whatever. I read a book called The Millionaire Next Door. And I don't know if you're familiar with this book or not. It's been out probably since like the mid to late 90s. I've got to think this book is probably getting close to 20 years old. And it was very impactful for me because the guy that wrote it really talked about really truly living within your means. And looking at that guy across the street that has a $50,000 car, and you're driving the 6-7-year-old beater with 90,000 miles on it, still runs great, still gets you to work. Okay, it's got a little rust or a dent or whatever, right? Yeah. So, but anyway, that book really, really impacted me a lot because it made me start having a much clearer understanding of making those decisions correctly so that I could go out and build, something for myself rather than being lulled into this whole like society of, more consumerism, all this other kind of stuff that we're caught up with. So, I'm sure you can get it on Amazon or something like that. This is not a pitch to sell the book, but I'm saying for any of the listeners that are checking this out, if you like to read, I would highly recommend this book from a standpoint of you helping yourself with your own discipline when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So
let's answer the question, Shecky. Should you pay off debt before investing? So here's the deal, guys. The answer is it depends. Okay. It depends. So let me give you a couple examples. So a lot of it depends on your risk tolerance. Okay. We have, there's risk. You have to adjust for risk. So let me give you an example. So let's say you have $50,000 in student loans and you've got 3% interest rate on those. A lot of the student loans come with very low interest rates. So you got $50,000 in cash. All right. You can go pay off these student loans, attack it, get it out of the way, and then you get rid of that 3% interest rate, right? Or you can take the $50,000 and buy a rental property. Now, which one do you do? Well, it definitely depends on the spread. So let's say we take the $50,000 and we get a 13%, cash flow producing property. After all expenses, you make 13% net return on your $50,000. Well, now you have a 10% spread. In other words, 13% that you're making, 3% that money is costing you because you have opportunity cost rate of being able to pay that $50,000 student debt off.
Right.
Is that a good investment? Is that a time where you should invest before paying off debt? The answer is it depends. Do you want to take on that risk, right? I mean, to me, that one's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got something where, you're going to make 13% on the, $50,000, but, you've got also got these credit cards or whatever hanging out there at 10% interest rate. Well, now we have a 3% spread between the two. That's pretty tight. For me personally, I wouldn't want to take on that kind of risk. I'd rather just pay off the 10% debt and get that out of the way. And then I'm making a sure 10% on my cash, like no questions asked.
Yeah.
So Shecky, to me, it really comes down to risk adjustment. Is what are you investing that money into, and what could you do with that money as far as what could you be paying off? I personally think that if you've got credit cards and they're 15, 12, 15, 20%, whatever interest rate on those cards, I think you've got to attack those things first. I would not be buying, any type of investment property or investment anything. Get rid of those. Like, you've got to outpace those with your investment. I mean, you've got to really, really do well, with your investment. I mean, it's hard to outpace that kind of interest rate, right? So I don't know. Those are my thoughts to answer that question. Should you pay off debt before investing? Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you. And I think that, the American dream is obviously financial independence. And I want to just tell all the listeners out there, look, we talk to investors all day long. And if you are carrying even 8, 10, 12%, and you're just one of these regular Joe or Janes that likes the revolving credit game, you are going to have a really difficult time achieving financial independence.
Yes.
I'm not saying it to be an ass. I'm just saying it as a wake-up call. I mean, if it were me and I was really hell-bent on creating financial independence, which I am, then if I've got all this other debt out there, I might go and get another second job for a while. You got to find a way to increase the income to get ahead of that curve. There's only a couple ways to get more money flowing towards you, right? One is increase the amount of money that's coming your way, whether that's with a second job, a raise, side business, whatever, right? Some side hustle. And the other way, which we've already talked about, is decreasing current expenditures, right? So, hey, maybe you're already in the fancy house and listening to this and you bought too much house. Go downsize, right? Sell off the thing, right? Get something smaller. And, there's plenty of ways to do it if you are willing to maybe set your ego aside for the sake of having a fantastic future.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Shecky. So well done. Well done. So let's wrap up. I really I hope the listeners got a lot out of this. I think, it was a lesson in personal finance, not just, investing, but personal finance and making the right decisions, disciplining yourself, delayed gratification. Those are all fundamentals that have to happen first before you can actually become a successful investor. Like, I think successful investing is being smart personally with your financial decisions. So I think hopefully we delivered some great content. Guys, if you like the content that we're sharing, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you're getting this. And we're very excited to have you as listeners. If you would like to take a look at current properties that we have available and you're ready to become an investor, go to our website, highreturnrealestate.com, and take a look around at our newly revamped site. So with that, Shecky, thank you for being a part of this podcast, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you, Jack, and appreciate all the listeners. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.